West Africa has been here before. The tiny nation of Gambia with two presidents. After the winner of a December 1st presidential election took the oath of office earlier in the capital of neighboring Senegal, Adama Barrow's return to Banjul now depends on his hosts, who, along with other regional states, say they're ready to invade to enforce the will of the people. Gambia's strongman of 22 years refusing so far to budge. Yahya Jammeh instead declaring a state of emergency and giving himself till March to hear back from his hand-picked Supreme Court on his claim to invalidate the result. Could he still go quietly, even though that deadline is passed? When is the time for a forceful takeover? Many turning to regional powerhouse Nigeria and its president, Muhammadu Buhari. Nigeria, which in the past led interventions against strongmen in Liberia and Sierra Leone, often with mixed results. This time, it's clear if there is an invasion, it won't be Anglophone Nigeria, but Gambia's only neighbor, Senegal, that will be doing most of the heavy lifting. What next, then, for the up-and-down relationship between those two countries? What role for former colonial powers, France and Britain? What impact will this crisis have on the continent? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the showdown in Gambia. With us from Berea, Kentucky, Gambian commentator Sam Fady, who's been living in the United States since 2008. Thank you for being with us. Here in the studio, Nigeria political scientist Emmanuel Iga. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
And France 24's very own Fatima Tawan.
Nice.
Nice to see you. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Let's begin with images that came in just a short while ago. A ceremony taking place inside of the Gambian embassy in Dakar.
Political uncertainty on a day that was supposed to mark Gambia's first democratic transition of power in over 30 years. Last-ditch diplomatic efforts to persuade longtime leader Yahya Jammeh to stand down appear to have failed. His mandate officially ended at midnight local time. Gambia has been in a state of confusion since Jammeh refused to cede power after losing December's presidential election. He then turned to the courts and parliament to try to extend his 22-year rule. Meanwhile, the winner of the poll, Adama Barrow, is in neighboring Senegal for what may be called an inauspicious inauguration, and now fears of a military intervention. Senegal and Nigeria have sent troops to the Gambian border. The West African bloc ECOWAS is urging Jammeh to leave peacefully, but are prepared to enter the country if necessary. In Gambia, tensions are high, though the streets are quiet. Businesses closed, buses empty. After Jammeh declared a state of emergency Tuesday, many feared violence. Tens of thousands of people have fled the country, many children.
Yeah, and Adama Barrow then sworn in a short while ago. Adama Barrow, who had to have his swearing in not at home, but in the capital of neighboring Senegal in Dakar.
This is a day no Gambian will ever forget in one's lifetime. This is the first time since the Gambia became independent in 1965 that Gambia have changed their government through the ballot box. I must take this opportunity to thank the entire electorate of the Gambia and Gambians in the diaspora for making this day possible.
Emmanuel Iga, that's not all that we heard from Adama Barrow. He also has made an explicit appeal to ECOWAS, the African Union, and the United Nations Security Council to enforce the will of the people. But as our correspondent said, it's tough when you start your mandate in a foreign country.
Yes, it's a very extraordinary situation. I think I'm seeing this for the first time. So, but it's probably the only choice that was left for Adama Barrow and, let me say, the Gambian people and the people of West Africa and Africa as a whole to try to move forward on this issue. There has been an election. Adama Barrow was declared winner, and even when the votes were recounted, he still had a sufficient lead, I think 20,000 votes ahead of the incumbent president as of then, to still be confirmed as the winner of the election. So I think today he has the legitimacy and the legality on his side with the international backing, both at West African level and the African Union level. And I think we are expecting also the United Nations.
We're not expecting it. It's just come in. The United Nations Security Council unanimously backing the ECOWAS action in the Gambia.
Exactly. So this swearing in needed to be done to give Adama Barrow the authority to make this call to the international community, to the United Nations, to the West African neighbors. As a president now in power, to make this call. He couldn't have made it yesterday. He couldn't have made it before. So this is something that we were expecting to happen because we have been used to Yahya Jammeh and behaving this way today, that way tomorrow. And so we saw this coming. And this probably is the only way to resolve the problem now.
Only way to resolve the problem? He had said he wanted to hear back from the Constitutional Court, which hasn't sat since 2015 and which has some seats that are still vacant on it. The international community is not buying it, though. What are some of the reactions you're getting from Dakar?
Oh, let's say that the relation, everybody is aware that the relations between Senegal and Gambia has moved from complicated before Yahya Jammeh accession to power in the 94 coup to impossible after his accession. Basically, he's the non-educated soldier, okay, came to power through the coup, he attempted in 1994. And since then, the relationship between Senegal and Gambia has moved from complicated to impossible. And everybody is quite aware.
Because these two countries, at one point they fought a war, and at another point they had this Senegambian union. So it's been up and down. Yeah,
they had the Senegambian union that lasts only 6 years, I think, or 7 years actually. It lasted until 89 actually. So those political relationship, was very complicated because. And the first responsible of that is Yahya Jammeh himself. He is impractical. Nobody knows actually what he can do. He's so-called the man of Kelinkai, his small village where he's from. Nobody can actually say it because everybody remember that in December the 1st, he acknowledged his...
First he acknowledged the defeat.
Yeah, he acknowledged the defeat. Okay, he conceded defeat in the December, and then 2 weeks later, he just realized that Adama Barrow just promised him verbally that there won't be any legal pursuit against him. Maybe he promised too far and went through, promising him maybe amnesty, which actually he can't truly, promise to Adama Barrow. Adama Barrow cannot, promise him to Yahya Jammeh, but still he did it. And then just remind yourself that Adama Barrow, he's new in politics, okay? He's a businessman turned into politics. He's very new in that field. And that promise he gave, maybe
a verbal promise from Adama Barrow that he wouldn't face charges, that he'd be able to go peacefully. However, last month, the chair of the coalition that brought Adama Barrow to power, telling The Guardian she would prosecute, we are stopping him from leaving, she said, Fatoumata Jallo Tambajang said in an interview, we're negotiating. He says he wants to go to Kanilai, that's where his farm is. Any day he tells us he can. But if he wants to go abroad, then we say no. And it was perhaps comments like that one that incited him to change his mind. Sam Fateh, did the opposition fumble this by being too hard on Yahya Jammeh after his defeat?
Tactically, I would say that when you look at it initially, when Mrs. Tambajan said that President Jammeh would be prosecuted within 3 months to a year, but as a result of the situation in the country, they wouldn't do it right away. I mean, that sent a message to Jammeh right away to say, hey, look, you ought to do something, or else crimes you committed against the state, the human rights abuses, which were a huge focus and part of the reasons why Jammeh lost power, the corruption, the assets would all be taken away from you. Mind you, this is exactly what Jammeh did too when he came to power. So having realized that, of course, initially everybody scolded Mrs. Tambajan for her comment, because a couple of days after the comment, Jammeh decided that he will not be stepping down and came up with all these reasons why the elections should be nullified. Now, but moving forward, after reports came out that Jammeh has been hiring mercenaries that fought for Charles Taylor in Liberia and also fought for Laurent Gbagbo in Ivory Coast. And we must recall that Jammeh supported Laurent Gbagbo when he said he was not going to step down. So that validated what Fatoumata Tambajang was saying when she said Jammeh would be a rebel and he would hire mercenary fighters to invade the Gambia and start an insurgency. So that proved Fatoumata Tambajang correct. So it came to this position where, was Fatoumata Tambajang right for doing what she did? If she didn't do it on time, nobody would have known that Jammeh was hiring rebels either. At the same time, some analysts would say, look, tactically it was not the right move because that particular message started it all. But we will not be saying that Fatoumata Tambajang didn't warn us about this. But what this proves is that the coalition itself is divided over what they have to do with Jammeh. If you listen to certain a particular spokesperson for the president-elect and the president, Adama Barrow himself, like Halifa Saleh, they would say that Jammeh would not be prosecuted. He is going to be given amnesty. And from day one, you know, Adama Barrow is a political newcomer. He told Jammeh, when Jammeh called him to congratulate him, that he would seek advice from him. So, and Jammeh would be treated as a former president and that he could stay in the Gambia. But you also have advocates who say Adama Barrow can say that, but he cannot decide for the victims and their families as to what has to happen to Jammeh because they want justice. Now, some people in the coalition are talking about truth and reconciliation, but at the same time, you also have some within the coalition senior leadership that are saying, look, we have to prosecute this man. So absolutely, there is a division there when it comes to what they have to do with Jammeh.
It's definitely a quandary, and it's an age-old one. Do you pursue justice, even if it means that you may put somebody with their backs to the wall, and it might mean violence? And I was speaking earlier, Emmanuel Liga, with people in the capital of Sierra Leone, who had a president in exile back in the 90s. Who was put back in power thanks to Nigeria. And they were saying what we're hoping for is that he goes, but we're hoping there isn't going to be any bloodshed. And it's the idea is you have to be pragmatic, many people were saying.
I think that was what Nigeria understood and promised what the president of Liberia at the time Nigeria was intervening in Liberia. They promised him asylum, and they gave him asylum. Obasanjo gave
Charles Taylor asylum.
But the case of Charles Taylor is very...
That's done a lot of damage, because afterwards, even though they promised him amnesty, he was then extradited to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. So that sends what message to strongmen?
Yes, so that's the issue. I think the Gambian coalition probably should have understood this tactical aspect of things. Just keep cool when Jammeh considered defeat, and just say, okay, our objective is to get him out of the way. Let's swear in the newly elected president, and then we'll discuss what to do with him. And if they were to promise him amnesty, because we saw in the case of Charles Taylor, it was possible to go back on it when international community put pressure on Obasanjo, put pressure on Nigeria that he must be brought to justice. He was still brought to justice. So that could be done in time.
Think is on
2 years, 3 years
So you're saying is
could still be done.
That's on the back of every strong man's mind.
Of course, but I think it was on the back of his mind even when he considered defeat. He's not a novice in politics. He knows people could promise things and go back on it, but at least he made that promise. Okay, he conceded defeat and said, okay, I'm ready to go. So what we needed then was pragmatism. And just to say, okay, let's just keep the sleeping dog lying and, organize the swearing in at the right time, and then we get him out of the way. Then we can talk about what to do.
All right, our correspondent in Banjul telling us earlier about a strange atmosphere during that swearing-in. Streets empty, shops shut, but she heard cheers coming out of bars, people watching the inauguration ceremony on Senegalese television. What about inside of Senegal? How do people feel now? Do they want to go for an invasion?
I mean, people in Senegal, most of them are worried about what's going to happen. The outcome is
what is
very
it? There's some
uncertain.
26,000
26,000. Yeah, they just fled from.
I mean, I don't know if you call them refugees.
Yeah,
but
we don't know. Yeah, they fled Gambia towards Senegal. But just reminding that Gambia is a small country, actually the smaller in Africa. Less than 11,000 kilometers.
1.9 million people.
Yeah, inside of Senegal. So it's a very small country. And, there's a ties between Senegalese ethnic groups and the same people, basically.
They speak Wolof
They
on
see
both sides.
Wolof, Jola, you can see Mandang, all the same ethnic groups, they are shared alongside the borders. So they're just quite the same people, So people from Gambia have families, in Senegal. They can move to Casamance or upwards to Dakar. So they know really well all together, okay? And they can live together, of course. But in the political side, that's the main difference. And people are very afraid of what can happen. They know that Yahya Jammeh is not someone that you can be. He's not trustful. So he acknowledged first his defeat and he considered it. And afterwards, he came back, he changed his mind 2 weeks later. So nobody can say actually what he can say. The only thing that reassures people from Gambia and from Senegal as well is the fact that the chief of army, a Gambian chief of army, just said that he won't fire back. And once Senegalese troops,
he said this is a political dispute.
Yes,
he's quoted by Le
exactly.
Monde as saying, I'm not going to implicate my soldiers in a stupid war. I love my men. If they enter, we'll make do.
You make do. Yeah, that's a good thing. But just remind you that he at first, acknowledged the victory of Adama Barrow, and then he moved back. He switched from Adama Barrow to Yahya Jammeh as well.
You're talking about the chief of staff
Of course, the chief of army. Of course, he himself. So he's playing the game as well. So nobody knows actually if he's saying true and if he's truthful.
All right, uncertain times.
We don't know.
We're going to talk about how this is playing out, not just between those two nations, but throughout the African continent. When we come back, you're watching the France 24 debate.